lights, camera, sound.
Oh, I like that. Setting the stage already.
Well, we're diving into a time when those three little words, lights, camera, sound, really turned Hollywood upside down.
Mm-hmm. A real turning point. We're talking about the 1920s, the end of the silent film era.
When talking pictures, talkies completely revolutionized, well, everything.
Exactly. And, it's amazing how much this upheaval, this kind of seismic shift, is captured in Singin' in the Rain.
Yeah, such a classic film.
And for this deep dive, we've got some great resources to work with. We've got the original screenplay of Singin' in the Rain right here, and some really interesting academic analyses of the film.
Perfect. So what exactly are we trying to understand here? What's our goal for this deep dive?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to see how this massive technological change, this arrival of sound in film, really just completely reshaped the industry. It's not just about, adding sound to pictures. It's a whole new art form.
Right. And of course, that brings us to the rise of the Hollywood musical, which is kind of front and center in Singin' in the Rain.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. This huge cultural phenomenon comes directly out of the chaos of the transition to talkies. We'll explore that connection in depth.
Okay, so technological change, the birth of the musical, and I think there's another piece to this puzzle.
You're right, you got it. The social and economic backdrop of this era. The 1920s, a time of immense change, and Hollywood was at the heart of it.
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's go back in time then, paint the scene for our listeners. Hollywood in the 1920s.
Okay, so picture this. Silent films were king. Stars like Charlie Chaplin were like, I don't know, almost mythical figures.
Both icons.
Icons, exactly. And then out of nowhere, the jazz singer hits the screens, the very first talking picture. Boom. Everything changes.
Like a bomb went off.
And Singin' in the Rain, it really shows us how crazy this transition was. There's that scene, remember, with the premiere of The Dueling Cavalier, the movie within the movie. It was supposed to be this big romantic epic.
Yeah, silent film, but with sound added.
Exactly. And it was a complete and utter disaster. The acting, so exaggerated. The voices completely out of sync. The audience, they just couldn't stop laughing.
It's almost like watching a train wreck. You know it's bad, but you just can't look away.
Exactly. I mean, you can just feel the panic in the studio. Everyone's scrambling, trying to figure out how to make this talking picture thing actually work.
Right. Imagine being one of those silent film stars, used to being worshipped, and suddenly they're, well, kind of a joke.
Ooh, yeah. Talk about a fall from grace. But, Singin' in the Rain does a great job of showing how Hollywood, despite all the chaos, managed to adapt, to innovate.
Yeah, they didn't give up, did they? They found a way.
And that's where the musical comes in, this brand new genre, practically born out of necessity. Think about it. The Dueling Cavalier bombs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then they take that same story, adapt it into The Dancing Cavalier, a full-blown musical, and suddenly it's a hit.
It's like magic, isn't it? Sound and music just transformed the whole thing.
Exactly. And Singin' in the Rain, it really highlights that evolution. You have the silent film, the Royal Rascal, then the failed talkie, and finally, the musical. It's like a little history of cinema right there in the movie.
Oh, and I love that scene where Kathy Selden, the voice double for Lena Lamont, gets her big reveal. She's finally recognized as the true star,
Yeah.
not just the voice behind the curtain.
Such a great moment, right? It's like a symbolic passing of the torch, showing how important sound became in film.
Okay, but before we get too deep into the musical, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, this idea of misreading.
Ah, yes. It's a fascinating concept. Really gets at the heart of how artists, how any creative person deals with the influence of their predecessors.
So what exactly is it? Is it like reading the wrong script, getting things mixed up?
Well, not quite. Think of it more like a musician sampling an old song to make a new one. They're paying homage to the original, but also putting their own spin on it, creating something fresh.
Okay, that makes sense. So how does this apply to Singin' in the Rain?
Well, there's a key example in the Broadway melody number. It's not just a dazzling performance, it's actually a misreading of two earlier films, The Broadway Melody, which came out in 1929, and Der Blaue Engel, a German film from 1931.
Okay, wow. So Gene Kelly, as Don Lockwood, is kind of having a conversation with these earlier films through his performance.
Exactly. He's taking inspiration from the past, but ultimately forging his own artistic path. And it's all happening right there on the dance floor.
Okay, I'm officially mind blown. So I've got the technological revolution, the rise of the musical, and now this idea of misreading as a creative force. What's next?
Well, let's take this misreading a step further and see how it ties into the cultural landscape of the time.
Oh, intriguing. The Broadway Melody number. as a cultural commentary. I'm all ears.
Trust me, this is where things get really interesting. You know those premiere scenes in Singin' in the Rain? All those flashing lights and fancy cars.
Oh, yeah. Pure Hollywood glamour.
Well, they're not just there for show, They actually tell us a lot about 1920s Hollywood, the whole culture.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What do you mean?
Well, remember when Don Lockwood shows up and the fans just go wild?
Yeah, the screaming, the autographs, the whole frenzy.
Exactly. It captures that energy, that excitement surrounding Hollywood, but it also shows the kind of manufactured nature of it all.
Like, it's all a bit staged.
Well, yeah. Like, remember when Cosmo Brown pretends to Rin Tin Tin's stand-in? Clearly a publicity stunt.
Oh, right. Hilarious, but yeah, definitely orchestrated.
The studios were all about controlling the narrative, creating that buzz.
Right, and it wasn't just about the spectacle. This whole shift to talkies, it wasn't just an artistic change, was it?
No, not at all. It was a huge economic upheaval for Hollywood. I mean, massive.
You can practically see the dollar signs spinning in their eyes.
Well, think about all the changes the studios had to make. All that new equipment, the rewiring, the whole shebang.
It must have been chaotic.
Oh, absolutely. And expensive. The stakes were incredibly high. Like, remember the premiere of The Dueling Cavalier?
Yeah, that didn't exactly go well.
Not at all. And that wasn't just a creative failure. It was a potential financial disaster.
I bet that made everyone sweat a little.
Oh, yeah. You can feel that anxiety, that pressure in the film. Everyone's worried about being left behind, as the industry scrambles to adapt.
So it's a story about creative innovation, but also about survival, right?
Absolutely. And in the midst of all that chaos, you see those sparks of ingenuity, like the birth of the musical genre itself. It's like they found a way to turn this crisis into an opportunity.
Well, they certainly made a splash with it.
They did. Now, if we look at the power dynamics at play here, I think the character of R.F. Simpson, the studio head, he's a really interesting figure.
He's the one calling all the shots.
Exactly. He decides which films get made, who gets hired, how they're going to navigate this whole talkies thing. He's got all the power.
And then there's Lena Lamont, trying to hold on to her stardom, refusing to change with the times.
Yeah, she's a great example of how some people just couldn't adapt. She represents that old guard clinging to the past, even as it slips away.
And Kathy Selden, she's the opposite. Embracing the change, seeing the potential in this new technology.
Exactly. She's the future of Hollywood, the fresh talent, ready to take center stage.
It's like a changing of the guard almost.
Right. And Singin' in the Rain captures that tension so well, that struggle between tradition and innovation. It's a story about adaptation, about how the industry had to reinvent itself to survive.
And it makes you think about how, even today, Hollywood is always changing, always pushing boundaries, right?
Oh, absolutely. Technology, artistic trends, it's a constant evolution.
It's a whirlwind. So what does all this mean for us, for the people watching the film today? What's the takeaway?
Well, I think it's a reminder that change is inevitable, and we can either fight it or embrace it. Like those characters in the film, we have to find our own way to navigate the ever-changing landscape.
And maybe find a way to sing in the rain while we're at it.
Exactly. Find the joy, the creativity in the midst of the chaos. But, we haven't talked about everything yet. There's one more crucial scene I think we need to revisit to really understand the power dynamics at play.
Oh, which one is that?
That scene at the premiere where Lena is lip-syncing with Kathy's voice coming from behind the curtain. It's a pivotal moment, I think.
Yeah, that's the moment where the whole charade is exposed, right?
It is. And I think it really highlights the manipulation and control that can happen in Hollywood.
Right. Lena thinks she's still the star, but she's literally being voiced by someone else.
Exactly. She's lost her voice, in a way, become a puppet for the studio.
Kind of a sad commentary on the whole idea of fame, isn't it?
It is. And then there's Kathy, the real talent, hidden in the shadows.
Her voice is used, but no one knows it's her.
It speaks to the struggles a lot of artists face, especially women, trying to make it in a system that can be, pretty unfair.
Yeah, but then, of course, we get that amazing moment when Kathy is revealed.
The curtain pulls back, the spotlight shines on her.
And the audience goes wild. It's such a satisfying moment.
It is. Like truth and talent finally win out.
It's like a fairy tale ending, but it's earned, Both Kathy and Don have to go through a lot to get there.
Yeah, Don has to let go of this illusion he has about Lena, see her for who she really is.
And recognize Kathy's true worth.
Exactly. It's a nice reminder that real talent, real authenticity will eventually shine through.
This whole deep dive has been amazing. Singin' in the Rain, It's not just a fun musical, is it?
No, not at all. It's a really clever commentary on Hollywood, on the power of technology, on the human desire for, well, for fame and recognition.
And the resilience of the human spirit, right?
Absolutely. And, it's a film made in the 1950s, but its themes are still so relevant today.
Yeah. We're still dealing with rapid technological change, the allure of fame, this constant pressure to present a certain image.
It's timeless, really. So as we wrap up, what's the one thing you'd want our listeners to take away from this?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think for me, it's the importance of looking deeper, Don't just take things at face value. There's always more to the story, layers of meaning waiting to be uncovered.
Yeah, and maybe Singin' in the Rain can inspire people to find their own voice, their own way to express themselves, and maybe even sing a little in the rain.
That's perfect. And hopefully they'll watch the film with a fresh perspective, see all the layers we've talked about.
Well, thanks so much for taking us on this journey through Hollywood history. It's been a real treat.
My pleasure. Always happy to dive deep into a good film.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those cameras rolling.